So, hello and welcome along to another edition of Isolation Interviews for Hospital Radio and for my YouTube channel. And I'm super excited to be joined by the legendary Danny John-Jules. Thank you for joining me.
All right, mate. How's it going?
Really well, thank you. How are you? How has life been this last year, this very weird year we've been in?
Well, as you can see, I've been caged up like everybody else. It's a cat in a bird cage. Yeah. Well, I mean, I still had to do all the other stuff, homeschooling two kids and all of that stuff, and everything was on Zoom. And so I've pretty much been going through what everyone else has been going through, Luckily, I got to do a couple of things where I recorded, either on Zoom or from my house. And other than that, I've been, sort of just trying to get into different projects, and there's lots of stuff that, had to be sort of halted. And so it's like having to restart all over again, but it's good. I'm one of the lucky ones. At least I've got some old stuff out there, that gets played. So I can't grumble.
I mean, have you found yourself learning, because I know a lot of people have been learning new skills, whether it's gardening, baking, building things. Have you found yourself learning anything new over this last year?
Yeah, I learned how to edit on iMovie. So while I was in lockdown, I've got it started from a phone call from a mate of mine, and 3 hours later, I've got a documentary that's about 3 hours long. I've just been editing and cutting the music, cutting and pasting music and all kinds of madness. So it's about 3 hours long, or I'm trying to finish it.
I mean, that's another thing is obviously, being able to work from home. I mean, do you quite enjoy being able to sort of just sit at home and work on things, whether it's, editing or voiceovers or anything like that? Do you find that quite nice being able to do it from home?
Yeah, because I've been on the road for 40 years, so for me, this is like going back to, a 9 to 5, and I haven't done that since the 70s. So yeah, it's quite strange not being out and about, but that's how comes I've done so many things, because I'm always out, doing something, trying to create something new. So a year sitting around. So that's why I still had to create. So I just created on my laptop. I would just be airdropping stuff from phone to the computer and backwards and forwards, and it's a copyright nightmare. I mean, I can't actually use it in any form, but there's about 10,000 bits of copyright with no permissions. So basically, it's just not for, public use, I suppose, but I can send it around on WhatsApp.
I mean, sometimes it's great because it's being able to just have something to do, because there are a lot of times when, especially over this last year, if people have been furloughed or haven't been able to do their normal day jobs, it's good for them to find things they can do that keep them occupied, because the worst thing you can do is just do nothing, because then that's when the brain starts to rot and you just end up becoming sort of, lazy, and you lose the mind is so important. You have to keep it going.
Well, they're saying if you don't use it, you lose it. So, I always, probably too much, really, keep my brain occupied. My problem is trying to get it to go to sleep, So that I've never had a problem with it, crackling away there. But, it's then how do you wind down? Your adrenaline factor's high, so it's quite difficult to wind down. And that's the opposite to a cat, of course, which can wind down at leisure. So yeah, there's contradictions in me and my characters.
Now, we will come on to some of your characters in a little while, but the other thing we must be super grateful for is the amazing work that the NHS and all key workers out there have been doing over the past year. I mean, what's your sort of opinion been of the hard work they've all been doing over this year, and just how grateful we all are for them?
Well, I know from firsthand, when I left school, I worked at the National Heart Hospital in CSSD. So I was like, cleaning the theatre stuff and sterilizing all the equipment and stuff. So, but as we walked out of our department, I walked straight out onto the gallery of the operating theatre. So for me to watch, Professor Samagdiaku do a heart operation was like going to lunch. So, and he was the number 2 at that time. There was a different guy who was the main guy. And 40 years later, I was invited to his charity ball that he does, the Chain of Hope charity, where he sends all these heart specialists go all over the world doing these operations in these poor countries. And it was an extraordinary evening. When they all went up on stage, I went, my goodness, there's like 40 of them, 50 of them, going on. And this one guy, and so I got a photo with him, and I told him I used to work in, he couldn't believe it. So that was, that kind of stuff really happens, I also sung with the choir at the Albert Hall. It was in Bloodwise, Christmas with the Stars. So I'm always bumping into National Health Service people. And obviously I know firsthand how hard they work, So I'm one of the ones that don't need convincing.
I was going to say they do such an amazing job. We're super grateful for everything they do, and I do think that some people have maybe sort of taken them for granted a bit, but I do believe that hopefully this last year has proved that they are so needed, so important, and so deserve much more than they get, I think.
Well, but I think that's been the case through history. I suppose that's why they call them angels, isn't it? That's exactly what they are. They're the ones that are always there when everyone has departed. Names ring true sometimes, and I think that's probably one of them. Well, definitely one of them, should I say.
Now, for you, where did the kind of the performing bug come from? Where did you kind of first get interested in, acting and dancing? Where did that all come from?
I really don't know, because there's no one in my family had really been, on the side of the arts as far as, entertainment was concerned, So I think I was lucky enough to get into a film when I was 14, and it was just sheer luck that the director was making a film for Scotland Yard about juvenile delinquency, and the local legendary community worker to counsellor, Pat Smythe, was showing the director around Notting Hill, and I just was in the right place at the right time with another kid that I lived down the road from, and we were in this film called Seven Green Bottles. But even at that time, having made a movie and not really thought about a career in the arts, I just carried on school as normal. And it was about that time that one of our PE teachers at school started a lunchtime gymnastics club, and I went to that. So I gave up 2 lunchtimes a week and did gymnastics instead. And so he said that, if anyone got good enough, he'd take them to the club that he teaches at in the evening. So there was me and this other kid, Leslie, and we went to, we finally got, you couldn't do this now. So twice a week after school, me and this kid, Leslie, would jump into Mr. Power's Mini, and he'd drive us from Edgware Road to Mornington Crescent, and then we'd get our own way home. After it was like, you could never do that today. But that was normal. So, then obviously roll forward, I was doing the regular menial work, left school, no qualifications, and got a job at a building site. And then in a boring warehouse, measuring leather. And funny enough, it was called Connolly Leather in King's Cross. I digress for 1 minute because it's relevant. Is a tannery. So I worked there. I mean, it was boring. It was leather coming out of a machine, and you measure it, 14.8, So fast forward to Red Dwarf and a gentleman called Robert Llewellyn, who, not many people might know this, was a cobbler. And he used to get his stock from Connolly Leather around about the time when I was working there. So, which is now, is it the T&G Union, Bob Crow? It is now, that building is now the union headquarters.
Oh, wow.
I went down there one day and I actually signed the condolence book for Bob Crow, because that was where I used to work. It was mad. I didn't go in. I didn't know it was that building. I ended up signing the book, But yeah, digressing. So back to the job. But that was one of my jobs, when I left school. And then I was, then I worked. So I did the building site. I did the boring warehouse. I did the hospital, and then I did the washing hair in a hair salon in Baker Street. And that was what I was doing before I got my first. Sorry, I'll just stop that. So that's what I was doing before I entered show business, and that was as a dancer. Because while I was doing those jobs, I went. A friend of mine, I followed him to this group. He said, "Oh, there's this new, there's this new club starting group, whatever, play group. They're doing acting or something." Anyway, I followed him down there, and he never went back, and I just kept going. So that's what I was doing while I was working. I was going to this drama group in the evenings in the church hall in Notting Hill. And so it all sort of went from there. That's when I got little parts in Scum and those, little walk-on parts where you learn the trade, And then I got a job dancing in the Dougie Squires Second Generation, which was a big old dance troupe back in the day, very musical and variety in that kind of era. And that was it, really. I was in the business from that moment, and I mean properly. That means I was not going back to a 9 to 5, and I haven't. But that was basically the way in. People say, "How do you get into show business?" And I find it very hard to explain how, because I can only tell you from my own experience, and my own experience will probably never happen to no one else exactly the same as it happened for me. So you can't really explain that one. It's a question that I've been asked many times, and I can't find the right answer, because if I tell them that story, they'd be sleeping by the time I got to the end.
Now, one thing that a lot of people might not know is you actually appeared in a WHAM music video for Edge of Heaven. So
Right.
that must have been was it a strange sort of situation to be in, but also quite an amazing one?
No, because I'd always been working with very famous people. My first job, I was behind Jimmy Tarbuck and Dickie Henderson. And, I did Panto with Norman Wisdom, the guys from Ain't Half What Mum, Alvin Stardust. I worked with David Cassidy. I worked with Cliff Richard. I worked with all these people that I grew up watching on telly. Me and Norman Wisdom were born in the same hospital.
Oh, wow.
He's from just up the road. His dad threw him out at 14. He's been on the street since he was 14, joined in the army. He was a boxer. Then he joined the entertainment corps. Then I worked with him. So it's nuts, isn't it?
It's funny how life works out in the end.
And he was a very talented guy, But he used to go to school with no shoes. I mean, he was that poor. And Yeah, Fern. It literally 5 minutes from my house is where he grew up. And then, I didn't know that at the time when I worked with him, so it's quite weird, when you think, people like Mike, Mike and Bernie Winters, Bernie Winters and Schnorbitz and all these people, the Crankies, Lenny Henry's variety show. I was already, before I ever hit television, I'd already been in, Freddie Parrotface Davis, and I'd already worked with all these, legends of variety. So by the time I got to my first TV, I was a dancer in the Lena Zavaroni series at the BBC, and then you'd meet all the guest stars on there, people like Spike Milligan, and I met all of those kind of people. So by the time I got to Red Dwarf, I was already schooled in that sort of variety world, which is what Red Dwarf actually came, as they said in those days, it was part of the alternative comedy takeover.
And I mean, Red Dwarf
and unfortunately, that same Red Dwarf is responsible for people not really wanting to watch those old variety guys anymore. So I was in a quandary, you see. I was stuck between the two of them, and I had to live both worlds, because even while I was doing Red Dwarf, I was still doing musical theatre, darling, in the West End. I did 2 musicals in the West End while I was doing the initial block of Red Dwarf series. So I was living both of those worlds still. I was in the alternative comedy, but I was also in the variety community as well. So, it was a bit different for me than the other guys.
I was going to say, because obviously Red Dwarf had such a big following and was so popular. And I mean, would you say it's probably one of your sort of proudest achievements, or does that change a lot depending on what you're doing?
Well, but you see, this is exactly why a lot of people do say, is that my proudest achievement? But how I got to that character was all the experience of the variety life that I'd been living, because that character is not made up of modern day characters. That character is made up of people of that era. The people that I was looking at when I was thinking about the cat, I thought of like, who's show busy, who's catty like, who's got those qualities in, if I was going to try and emulate that kind of flamboyant character. And it was really simple. As soon as I started thinking, in fact, I couldn't stop thinking of the characters to steal from. I mean, the most obvious is James Brown. They don't come more catty and crazy than him. And then you look at him, then you go Little Richard, you see the pink suit, you see the hair, the bouffant pompadours, as it was known in those days. And you see Chuck Berry, you see Cab Calloway, you see Prince, you see Morris Day from the time, you see Screaming Jay Hawkins. If you look at Screaming Jay Hawkins, you'll see the zebra skin coat like the cat, you see it. With Screaming Jay Hawkins was the first guy to come out. His act, he started coming out of a coffin with the skull, Alice Cooper was late, trust me. Yeah, look up Screaming Jay Hawkins, and he trained to be an opera singer. You see what I mean? So all of these characters were part of the cat, and Richard Pryor is pretty much the facial expressions and the rhythm of the way he speaks is Richard Pryor. And they don't come more catty and crazy than him. So, the influences are there and they're well documented, and that's pretty much, as I said, the experience of doing all of that razzmatazz and that showtime, folks, all of that. That's what the cat is, man. The cat's showbiz,
And I mean, anytime
long, you've got your Lister rhythm, and then you've got your trip rhythm, and then you've got your writing rhythm, and then you've got the cat. You see, if you listen to the rhythm of the characters, you'll see they all have different rhythms, and when you jumble that together, that's what makes it happen. If they were all sort of show busy lovies, it wouldn't work. So you've got the terribly uptight, sort of really proper rimmer, Then you've got, this dude doesn't really care.
And I mean, I was going to say, with that character, do you always
guilty guy in the middle, you know?
I was going to say, with that character, do you always find it quite easy to get back into that character when you've maybe given it a rest for a while, and then when you come back to it, is it always quite easy to kind of get back into?
Yeah, because I'd already, you know, I'd already kind of done songs from those characters, you know, because it was, you know, Sammy Davis Jr. And Jimi Hendrix. You know, you look at Jimi Hendrix. You know, Jimi Hendrix was talking about going to the moon a long time ago. You know, Jimi Hendrix's quote was, you know, Jimi Hendrix was the one that said, you know, someone said, you know, about visiting the moon. He said, I don't want to go to the moon. Everybody goes there. He said, I'd rather go to like Saturn or Pluto. You know, he was already out there. As a kid, his brother used to look up at the stars and swear they saw UFOs. You know, that's what they, I mean, so those characters have been around, you know, they've been around for so long. It's just, the cat is just another reincarnation of all these guys that have gone before him. You know, James Brown, you know, I mean, these guys were, you know, all had their time. They were all the best at their time. They were the best, you know, Little Richard, you know. Little Richard, you know, Little Richard said, Prince, I had a pink Cadillac before you were born. You know, those guys were, they, and when they were good, they told everybody they were good as well. So, you know, that's the whole biz, showbiz, man. Showbiz.
Now, I must just briefly talk as well about Death in Paradise, because that was obviously a huge part of your life as well. So, I mean, to get to film in such beautiful locations and to be part of such a popular show, another popular show, well, you know, that must have been a lot of fun.
Well, again, you know, it was something that I knew a lot about. It was set in the exact region where my family's from. Dominica's the next island along. So, you know, I'd be seeing my dad, you know, 2 hours on the ferry, I'd be with my dad, you know, like it was that kind of, this was another kind of, okay, well, I understand this character, you know. It was pretty much, you know, if you notice, you even see the father story come into Dwayne's life. I mean, it was all sort of happening in real life. So you just put it out there, didn't you? And that's why people, I suppose, enjoy it, because it comes from a place of realness, you know.
And is that a character you'd ever like to revisit in the future, do you think? Is that one you'd like to go back to?
Well, there's, you know, it's all about the character, really, because, you know, you can't spend, you know, for instance, the cat character, I've been playing the cat character for over half of my life. So, you know, if I felt that I was going to go back into Red Dwarf and I didn't think that I could keep the cat at that level, then I'd have serious misgivings about making his last appearance one of, well, that wasn't very good, was it? You know, so that's something you can only gauge when it's in front of you. So if you see the guys come back, then you know they've all read the script and have all agreed that, will you stop it, mate? I've got a dog chewing on my hand as we speak. You know? It's crazy. They've bought a dog, you know, in the house. It's like, now I'm not here alone and I've got to deal with it. Get off of me. The dog, you know, I'm a cat. Get off.
Dogs and cats don't mix well.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, no, but, you know, again, it's the reason why these programs work that my characters are involved in. If you look, you'll see that they are ensemble pieces. It's not about the individual character or the individual performer, because he's nothing without the rest. If he didn't have those people to bounce off of, you know, he wouldn't bounce, you know. So that's where you make or break a show. It's the ensemble, you know. It's being part of a unit rather than, you know, just concentrating on one journey, you know, with blinkered vision, because you're you're the leading actor, and even if I'm going to say that scene, even if it makes no sense because it leaves me on screen a lot more. You see, that's when you start doing all that kind of foolishness instead of going, man, this don't make sense. Can we take it out? There's a difference because it's going to slow up his gag coming next.
Exactly. It's all got to fit.
That's the difference.
Yeah. So all got to fit together to make sense. It's all, it's a whole team that makes a project work. It's not just necessarily one individual.
But you've all got to want to do it. You've got to want to not slow up the next gag because you've got a lot of lines, and you want to make it so it's right for the rhythm of the whole piece.
Now, I just want to say it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. But before we go, is there any messages you'd like to give to anyone who is currently stuck in hospital at the moment? Any sort of good luck messages or good get well soon messages?
Well, you know what they say, even though, we all get down, it still takes half the muscles to smile than it does to frown. Smile though your heart is aching. Smile even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by. That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll see the sun come shining through for you. Just smile. No warm up.
There we go. That was fantastic. A massive
out at the time.
A massive thank you, Danny, for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Of course, keep safe, keep well, and hopefully we'll speak again one day.
All right. Cheers, man.